Sometimes the best leadership is just getting involved if you can, at whatever level you can.
The path to leadership is often a winding one with unexpected turns. Sometimes you just have to jump right in and get involved however you can. That's how Barb Dobrowolski got to where she is today, as the president of the Ontario English Catholic Teachers Association. Hello, I'm your host, Juliana Mako, and welcome back to your source for everything and anything public education in Canada. With a new school year well underway, we're so happy to be back with a new episode in our Women Leaders in Education podcast series. In this episode, you'll learn more about Barb's leadership journey as she touches upon work-life balance, channeling her inner Susan Hopgood, the president of Education International, kindness as a leadership quality, and much more. We hope you'll enjoy our conversation with Barb.
Thank you.
Last time we spoke with you, it was in 2020, right before the pandemic. At the time, you were first vice president of OECTA, and you come in halfway through the pandemic. Now you're the president. How has that been?
Well, it was hard coming into a leadership role during the pandemic. We were all working remotely at the unit office, and it's hard to forge those new relationships, when you're working in isolation. So that was a bit of a challenge, especially since this is a job that is based so heavily on relationships and working together collectively.
So let's go back to the classroom for a moment where you started. So you mentioned that right away you got involved in the union. Now, being in the classroom, how's that informed your experiences and your leadership thus far?
Well, for one, I understand what teaching takes out of you and the kind of dedication it takes to do the job really well. And so I have always throughout my career had huge admiration for teachers, for my colleagues. And that's been very much what motivates me in what I do.
Right. And when did you make the decision to move from being a full-time teacher onto the union work full-time?
I've been very involved in the union almost from the very beginning of my career with a work to rule in my first year of teaching. And after that, I continued in my involvement and the work spoke to me. I really felt I need to advocate for teachers who don't advocate for themselves a lot. They always put students first and forget about themselves. As there became leadership positions available, I realized that, hey, I'm the person to step up to this. So I'm going to. And it wasn't long, like in my third year, I became a local unit president. I was partly released. It was a very small unit, 100 members. After that, after amalgamation, bigger unit, and I became vice president. I then had children. I think I was one of the few release officers to have a child during their tenure. So that was an interesting experience and not easy either because, when you're off on mat leave, there are other people jockeying for your position. And I did actually end up not being successful in a position when I ran to get reelected. Went back into the classroom and then once again, things changed and there was a position available, ran and had a sense at that point that I'd probably not be back in the classroom, that this is where my career was heading.
Right. Now, you mentioned that work-life balance, being a parent, how that was challenging. Now that you're president, are there any other barriers that you've had to overcome in the past little bit?
Well, yes, I'm an empty nester now. And that was actually part of the timing of my running for the position of president and for first vice president related to that because I wanted to be at home while my children were still at home. So I really made an effort to time things so that when they went away to university, that was a good time for me to take that next step. But that next step also involved a change in community for me. So I had to relocate to Toronto. And my spouse is still in our home in Ottawa. So we've had to make a real effort to bridge that gap. And we really try to spend weekends together. And some ways it's brought us closer because we talk all the time by phone and you really have to work to maintain those connections. So that's a bit of a barrier for sure. It can be a little lonely sometimes when you're on your own. So
Right. Now, You're the president of OECTA. Your counterparts in Ontario are all women leaders as well. Now, it shouldn't be an extraordinary thing because the teaching profession is predominantly women. However, what kind of message do you think this sends to other members, other people who identify as women, maybe students?
When I started, the people who were in leadership positions, especially in principals, superintendents, directors, so dominantly male. And we're still, back then, predominantly female profession. And so I think that women didn't picture themselves in that role. They didn't have as many role models. Now, when they look at for women affiliate presidents, I think that they're saying, yes, this is for me. I can do this. I know that role models are incredibly powerful and important. And I can, enumerate all of my role models right from the beginning of my career. And some of them were male, but the female ones were more important to me. And actually, I was at dinner with my affiliate president colleagues, and we were laughing about which of our mentors we like to channel when we're doing something that's very difficult. And we had a good laugh about this because I was talking about channeling my inner Susan Hopgood, who is the president of Education International. And so each of us, I think about the women who we admire and who are our role models and take something from each of them to try to emulate.
Now, speaking about supports, what kind of supports are out there for women who may be pursuing a leadership role?
For example, CTF puts on annual women's leadership symposiums. These have been so well attended by women in OECTA. And we ourselves have had a women's symposium called FemPower, but we haven't been able to put it on a yearly basis. When we did put it on, there was just so much interest, and it was really unfortunate that we had to turn people away. But lots of different organizations like the CLC, the OFL, they put on women's leadership programs as well. So it isn't hard to find these sort of programs and to sign up. But sometimes the best leadership is just getting involved if you can, at whatever level you can.
Now, just to wrap up, is there any other advice that you would give to women pursuing leadership roles?
I think that you have to find your own leadership style and be true to yourself. One of the things that I would advise, like people to talk about networking. For me, it was more about enjoying the people who I work with and forging friendships and with the colleagues. That was really important in terms of supporting you through a role that is often very lonely and very challenging. So when you can share your experiences with others who have similar roles and laugh about some of the things that you go through, that is incredibly supportive. And it also is more genuine, I think, in the long run, because you're not trying to forge these relationships for a political purpose. So I think that does you well in the long run. You need a thick skin. When you get into a leadership position, you are going to meet some people who are difficult and who are going to try to get under your skin repeatedly, especially during this pandemic we found. But other than that, I'd also say that kindness is not a weakness. And sometimes it takes more strength to be kind than you'd imagine. But I think that too often people don't think of that as a leadership quality. And I'd like people to think of it as a leadership quality. It certainly can be and should be in my mind.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. To learn more about the women leading their teacher organizations throughout the CTF FSAIR membership, check out the episode description to listen to the other episodes in our Women Leaders in Education series. Thank you for listening and tuning in to your source.